and welcome to this today's edition of World Today. We are going live to Washington, D.C., where all the developments are happening. The big meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Going live to Washington, D.C., those are visuals that you see of President Donald Trump in person receiving Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House. This is the high-stakes meeting. The meeting is underway as we speak. He did not respond to questions that were being fielded by reporters waiting out there. But this is a rare moment. In the recent past, we've not seen Donald Trump really come out and receive a leader, be it Macron, the French president, the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, or even Indian Premier Prime Minister Narendra Modi. But this is what a high-stakes deal means to Donald Trump. At least $500 million deal is what the two sides are looking at. Will that be signed or not is something we'll have to wait and see. The joint statement is expected in an hour or so from now. Zelensky wants a lasting peace in Ukraine with security guarantees like NATO membership, and that's the pretext and has been for the war that began between Russia and Ukraine. And in exchange, he does offer a deal of rare earth mineral mining in his country, which was proposed not by Ukraine, but by the United States of America. Since Donald Trump came to power, there has been a lot of developments in the three-year-old war in Ukraine. Because the US president wants it to end, there has been so far 2 Russia-US diplomatic delegation level talks. Okay, we just have Donald Trump speaking right there. Let's just dip into what he's saying.
And we appreciate working with you very much. And we will continue to do that. We have had some very good discussions with Russia. I spoke with President Putin, and we're going to try and bring this to a close. It's something that you want and that he wants. We have to negotiate a deal. But we've started the confines of a deal, and I think something can happen. The big thing is the number of soldiers, mostly at this point, but soldiers being killed. You're losing thousands of soldiers. On both sides, we're losing a lot of soldiers, and we want to see it stop, and we want to see the money get put to different kinds of use, like rebuilding, and we're going to be working very hard, but we've had a lot of very good conversations. I will say until we came along, the Biden administration didn't speak to Russia whatsoever. They didn't speak to anybody. They just allowed this to continue. And I will say that, I'll say in front of you, you've heard me say it 1,000 times, if I were president, this war would have never happened. We would have had a deal negotiated for you without having to go through what you've gone through. But your soldiers have been unbelievably brave. We've given them great equipment, but somebody has to use the equipment. They've been unbelievably brave, and we give them great credit. This was supposed to be over very quickly. And here we are 3 years later. So I give tremendous credit to your generals and your soldiers and yourself in the sense that it's been very hard fighting, very tough fighting, great fighters. And you have to be very proud of them from that standpoint. But now we want to get it over with. It's enough, right? We want to get it over with. So it's an honor to have you here. Thank you very much for coming. We're going to sign the agreement at the conference in the East Room in a little while, right after lunch. And we'll be having lunch together. We're also discussing some other things. And we appreciate everybody being here. It's somewhat of an exciting moment, but the really exciting moment is when they stop the shooting and we end up with a deal. And I think we're fairly close to getting that, and an honor to have you. Thank you very much. It's an honor to have President Zelensky of Ukraine. And we've been working very hard, very close. So we've actually known each other for a long time. We've been dealing with each other for a long time and very well.
Okay, that's Donald Trump saying that he wants lasting peace, but he's also announced, and that's the big news coming in, no conversations. He's saying that the deal is going to be signed in the East Room. That's a big development. That means both sides have decided on what this deal entails. Does this entail security guarantees for Ukraine? Because President Trump not so long ago had said that he's not going to guarantee securities, but in return for the minerals that they're going to source from Ukraine, there could be weapons that could be sent to Ukraine. So what's that security arrangement is something that we'll have to see. To discuss this and more, I'm being joined by Olga Khachova, who is a geopolitical and energy expert at the Atlantic Council. Olga, thank you so much for joining us here on the network. Let's begin with the deal. We thought that there is going to be more negotiation and conversations, but the deal almost is ready to be signed. What does this really mean for Ukraine when they have to now part with rare earth minerals and metals?
Thank you so much for having me on. This is a framework agreement, which means a lot of the details will be negotiated down the road. As of right now, what this deal entails is, contributing U.S. and Ukraine collaboration around development of Ukraine's resources. Now, not the existing projects or mines, but new licenses, new projects on critical minerals and oil and gas. So this leaves a door open for additional details and even potential guarantees as well. But those have not been finalized. Those details have not been finalized yet.
On the ground, Olga, in Ukraine, while there has been, everybody's looking at what's going to happen to the future of Ukraine, the change in administration in DC has not gone down well for Ukraine. There are also some quarters who are questioning this deal itself. Is Zelensky selling Ukraine completely to the United States of America?
Great question. This deal is a much better version compared to the first few versions of the deal. The earlier proposed deals asked Ukraine for $500 billion. And of course, that was an unreasonable ask. And Zelensky was a strong negotiator. He pushed back on that and waited for a much better version where these types of concessions were taken out. As of right now, Zelensky is not giving away anything. This is a framework agreement for US and Ukraine to work on development of resources in Ukraine. And now the breakdown in terms of how much US and US business souls will actually retrieve out of this is still in question. So as of right now, this is positive news for Ukraine because it provides a pathway for US Ukraine collaboration, long-term collaboration on large-scale projects. These are capital intensive projects. They take years and years to develop, and they require robust infrastructure. So rebuilding Ukraine's energy capacity that has been destroyed by Russia, but also building out additional infrastructure that can also be utilized in broader reconstruction efforts.
All right, Olga, then explain to us how would the framework agreement work between Ukraine and the United States of America, given that there are territories that are now under Russian control? Is that part of the negotiation? Are they looking at mines and areas of energy within those territories as well, including when you talk about energy security, Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant?
No, that's a really good reminder that about 30 to 40% of Ukraine's metals are in occupied territories. That's why it's really important that Russia is not rewarded for its aggression, for its atrocities, by just giving these resources away. This is why Zelensky wants strong guarantees. And it's also an important reminder that just giving these resources, these billions of dollars of resources to Russia, that the West, including U.S. companies in Ukraine and other allies, are going to be missing out on developing those resources ourselves. So that's a really important point for us to remember. Now, again, if U.S. is involved in any of these projects, although there aren't any
Right.
explicit security guarantees that are included in this version of the agreement yet, the U.S. businesses and U.S. engagement, if you read between the lines, that means that U.S. would want to protect its investments, its assets. These are $1 billion worth of projects
Right.
if they were to move forward.
Right, but then I have an important question for you for the Trump and Putin conversations that are taking place. Stay on with me. Before we go to that, let's take a quick look at what this deal is going to look like, the deal between Ukraine and the United States of America. Preliminary reports suggest that Ukraine will have to allot 50% of its revenue to reconstruction fund for rebuilding the country. US will gain access to critical rare earth minerals like uranium and lithium reserves in the country. Ukraine wanted security guarantees, but it seems like it's not getting any support from the United States of America militarily. And finally, going forward, Ukraine will have to focus and prioritize investment and trade over military aid to rebuild its economy. Now, the question is, what are these minerals and how much does Ukraine have to unleash this clamor for mining? First of all, there's no updated inventory of it. Some reports suggest that the data available is from the Soviet era. Going by what's available, here's a breakdown of some of the key mineral ores and its possible reserves in Ukraine. Ukraine's share of global reserves of graphite is 6%. It's used in the largest volume in lithium-ion batteries and also in applications from nuclear reactors to pencils. According to the Ukrainian Geological Survey, the country is one of the largest repositories of graphite in Europe. Next is lithium. The State Geological Service said Ukraine has one of Europe's largest confirmed reserves, estimated at 5 lakh metric tons of lithium, vital for batteries, ceramics, and glass. Titanium share of global reserves in Ukraine stands at 1%. Ukrainian Geological Survey claims that the country has the largest titanium reserves in Europe and could be capable of meeting the US and EU metallic titanium demand for the next 25 years. In case of uranium, the share of global reserves is 2 to 4%. Uranium is a primary reactive material used in nuclear power generators and reactors. Russia and China currently supply 55% of the world's uranium enrichment capacity. Russia's invasion of Ukraine deeply affected the uranium enrichment market as Western nations diversified or cancelled fuel deliveries from Russia. Now, the question is, how much of it is really in Ukraine's control? Listen in to experts.
So the Ukrainians are claiming that they have some 5% of the world's rare earth metals in their territory. That is to say, in internationally recognized Ukrainian territory, which is not the same as what Kiev actually controls right now, of course. However, even this figure is disputed. There are reports out there which suggest that that has been overestimated and that Ukraine does not have as much as it claims, which brings into question the whole nature of the deal. But beyond that, of course, as Ukraine is a country at war, as it is a country that is under occupation in parts of its territory, then this brings into question the fact that it means that the war is a huge variable, the outcome of the war. So whether a deal is done or a victory is achieved on the battlefield will have an effect on the deal itself. So it does seem rather premature to agree on a deal when you don't know the full extent of the deposits and you don't know who's controlling them.
Okay, Olga, it seems like a lot is being talked about in terms of reserves and what Ukraine has, but in terms of what they could finally end up finding or exploiting could be far less in such a scenario. And critically speaking, this is geostrategically very important for Russia. In such a scenario, where do you think America and Russia would stand when the conversation takes place on Ukraine?
This is a huge win for Ukraine because, again, this signals US long-term engagement in Ukraine. This signals long-term interests and long-term partnerships. These are not projects that can be done in a couple of months, right? These are year-long, decades-long types of engagements. It's a strong signal to Russia that US has not abandoned Ukraine, that there are opportunities for win-win deals that would benefit both United States and Ukraine.
Right, but isn't it too early to say that this engagement will last? Because we're talking about the US president, President Trump, could change his mind should there be any difference of opinion or changes when it comes to his conversations later with President Putin. What happens then? The reliability factor, Olga, we've been talking about this all through the conversations to do with Ukraine and US, and it all comes down to whether if US finally is a reliable partner or not.
No, that's a great question because the reality is there is a lot of vagueness. There is a lot of uncertainty around what the details, what the next steps of this agreement are. You're absolutely right. As of right now, let's be honest, this is just a framework agreement, an intention to cooperate on these resources, on developing these resources. But I will say one important item here is that economic development, economic cooperation, if this too moves forward, if this deal takes place and there's some additional details, some additional commitments and numbers signed into it, and then we actually see private sector going into Ukraine from United States and developing these resources, I would say that actually that provides more stability, more certainty into the future because these are billion-dollar types of investments. So if a company in the United States or across the world is willing to go in and invest a significant amount of money into these projects, that already signals kind of this, this private sector partnership that outlasts the pendulum swings of, the political debates that's taking place.
All right, interesting. I had spoken to the European Commissioner for Trade and Economic Security a while ago, Maroš Šefčovič, and this is what he had to say about Europe's engagement with Ukraine. Where does Europe stand? Is it as transactional, or will it get as transactional as America? Listen in. Trump is looking at the minerals, so is Europe. Are you also going to look at how you can best look at optimizing and exploiting the resources in Ukraine? And what do you make of the $500 million resources deal between US and Ukraine?
I have to say that if it comes to the peace in Ukraine, we are definitely not transactional. I mean, I'm from the neighboring country, from Slovakia, and I can tell you that until today, I remember vividly to see literally the millions. At one point, it was more than 10 million Ukrainian refugees, especially the women and children, and how all the neighboring countries, including Slovakia, have been opening their homes, the hospitals, the schools, providing the jobs for these people, and how these people been thankful. So from our side, it's just a pure solidarity. We are not looking for any transactional advantages. And as a coincidence, I remember how we've been dealing with the critical raw materials, because it was well before the war, but we actually signed the MOU on critical minerals, but the goal was a little bit different, that we work together, we would invest, and we would have, of course, the joint benefit from such exploration. And this is actually the offer which we are proposing to all countries. I believe that, of course, India would be one of them. We want to create local value added, we want to create local jobs, we want to make sure that there is also a local value chain behind it, and that it's our joint project from which both of us would benefit.
And while the two leaders are talking, there is a real war going on in Ukraine. In past 3 years and almost a week, this war has killed or maimed nearly 1 million lives. And these are very rough estimates, as the real cost of this war can only be figured out once it stops. The question is, can the leaders of both countries and all other global powers come together to ensure a lasting peace? Here's a report of what's happening in Ukraine and Russia at this moment.
There's a war raging in Ukraine for 3 years. It has led to staggering human losses, with estimates placing the total number of dead and wounded at nearly 1 million from both sides. It's been one more week into its 4th year, and the war continues to destroy lives in Ukraine and in Russia.
I heard the sound of a drone. It was very loud, like it was very close. And then a sudden explosion. I ran out to the lobby. It was scary. Everyone was running and screaming.
A Russian drone hit a Zaporizhia apartment block late on Thursday evening. 69-year-old Nadia's daughter had a home in the block that is now destroyed. but her daughter's family was unharmed as they were out of town.
He may vanish, this Putin. He's such a scum. What has he done? Is he human?
The Ukrainian military claimed that on 28 February it had shot down 107 drones out of 208 launched by Russia overnight. The Air Force said another 97 drones had been lost and did not reach their targets, likely due to electronic warfare countermeasures. But it did not specify what happened to the remaining 4 drones. On the other side, Russia's Federal Security Service claimed that it had foiled an attempt by Ukraine's military intelligence service to assassinate a senior priest in Russia's Orthodox Church, close to Vladimir Putin. For years, Russian media reports suggested the priest to be Putin's confessor. The Russian Security Service detained 1 Russian and 1 Ukrainian man in connection with the plot and has confiscated an improvised explosive device, and that the 2 suspects had confessed. This war now is heading for a new turn, where diplomatic talks and transactional deals are going to settle its future. After a long stalemate, there is movement in the peace deal, but there is no winner in this war.
As all things being equal, then there actually are no winners in this war. Not the Ukrainians, who have been emasculated and have had so many of their own people slaughtered, but also naturally this is debilitating Russia for the sake of a dream of an empire, and that isn't going particularly well either. So I don't think there are any winners. Obviously, Trump wants to be the winner. Ukraine wants to continue to exist.
Given the challenges in verifying figures of the true extent of losses of the Ukraine war, its staggering impact remains unclear. Yet, this war since 24th February 2022 has shaped the demographic and economic futures of both Russia and Ukraine for years to come. Bureau Report, India Today.
Well, those are developments coming in between Ukraine, US and Russia. There is a meeting that's underway between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky. We'll track all those developments. A joint statement will be issued soon. With that, shifting focus. Trump trade war escalates. US President Donald Trump's proposed 25% tariffs on Mexican and Canadian goods will come into effect on the 4th of March, while also threatening to impose an additional 10% on Chinese imports on the same date. Canada has vowed to give an extremely strong response if the United States of America imposes tariffs on Canadian imports. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said that he does not want a trade war with the US. Amid all this, at a joint press conference, President Donald Trump interrupted British Prime Minister Keir Starmer while he was answering a question from a journalist on the issue of Canada. Trump said, "That's enough, thank you," to a reporter on the question about Canada.
We will continue to do that work and do everything necessary to avoid these tariffs coming in. But like I said, if on Tuesday there are unjustified tariffs brought in on Canada, we will have an immediate and extremely strong response, as Canadians expect.
You mentioned Canada. I think you're trying to find a divide between us that doesn't exist. We're the closest of nations, and we had very good discussions today, but we didn't discuss Canada.
Thank you.
Trump's tariff war could possibly have pushed Indian markets in a preemptive shock. Dalal Street was again seen in the red today. In the last week, the benchmark indices witnessed a sharp correction, with the Nifty ending nearly 3% lower, while the Sensex was down over 2,000 points. Among sectors, all the major sectoral indices registered profit booking at higher levels, with the capital market and IT indices correcting sharply. Today, Nifty was down by 400 points and the Sensex was around 1,400 points down. The major drop was seen in mid and small cap IT and telecom stocks. There are many reasons for the market plunge. The most important one is Trump's tariff round. The US dollar is maintaining its position near multi-week peaks against major currencies. The dollar index reached 107.35 on Friday against 6 major currencies. With that, it's time for me to close this show. News and updates will continue on the other side. We'll keep coming back to you same time, weekdays, with all the international stories doing the rounds. Goodbye and take care.